Senator, as you said, the centerpiece of your recommendation was the establishment of a Department of Homeland Security. I think that is close at hand, but it's also going to be occurring at a time when we have intelligence information that indicates we might have additional risk as a result of what's happening around the world. In fact, earlier today, the Director of Central Intelligence sent to this committee a letter in response for our request for further declassification of the national intelligence estimate that was issued last week. And in the letter, Mr. Tennant states, Baghdad for now appears to be drawing a line short of conducting terrorist attacks with conventional or chemical or biological weapons against the United States. Should Saddam conclude that a U.S.-led attack could no longer be deterred, he probably would become much less constrained in adopting terrorist actions. Such terrorism might involve conventional means, as with Iraq's unsuccessful attempt at a terrorist offensive in 1991, or chemical and biological weapons. So we're at a point that the threat level is up, and we are about to pass this new department, and you indicated correctly, maybe conservatively, that it's going to take some period of time for the new department to go through its transition period and be fully effective. With that as a predicate, any suggestions of what we should be doing in the early stages of this new department so that we don't have the unintended consequence of making us more vulnerable because of the almost unavoidable disruptions that such a major new reorganization entails?
You know, that's a very interesting question, and I want to give you an answer because I have thought about it a bit, not in quite the way you phrased it, but let me put it this way. One of the things that is vastly misunderstood, certainly in the country and maybe in parts of the Congress, is that each of these agencies is going into the Homeland Security Department is going to maintain its identity. The Coast Guard will still be the United States Coast Guard. FEMA will still be FEMA. INS will be INS. Secret Service will be Secret Service. I mean, and the one or two others that they've added to what our recommendations were. What they're going to have the advantage of is being part of one department with a common leadership and a common technology base. I think it's very important that once this legislation passes, that the Congress in the transition section of the statute, either in report language or in statutory language, make it clear that these agencies that continue to operate at their present levels of activity and whatever their tempos are, irrespective of the fact they're being merged into the new agency. The merger can take place administratively, but the people in the field who are doing the work cannot be deterred from what they're doing. That would certainly apply to the Border Patrol, the Coast Guard, and the INS. And I think it's a very good question. I don't think, as I remember the statute, there's nothing in there regarding that. And I think you get my point, that they better keep doing their job as they're moving into the new agency. It's like, you know, consolidating two fire departments. You want to make sure the engines are running while the transition is going on, lest the town burn down.
Can I ask one more question? If I could ask one more question along the same lines, and it comes from one of the recommendations that Director Free made. It was number 10. He calls for consider establishing a domestic public safety office in the executive with responsibility for coordinating and supporting national law enforcement issues. Now, there has been a proposal that within the Department of Homeland Security, in addition to creating the department, that an office similar to what Mr. Free has suggested be established in the White House in much the same way that after the 1947 National Security Act, we created the National Security Council to be the coordinative agency and the most direct advisor to the president on national security issues. Do you think we need within the executive branch, potentially within the White House itself, a domestic public safety office for similar coordinative and supporting functions?
Well, we now will have a Department of Homeland Security, but as I understand, the President intends to keep by executive order a Homeland Security unit within the White House, and you've got the NSC. I'm not sure if I agree with Director Free on that. I'd have to think about it. The problem I have is when you start, I mean, if it was organized in the right way, maybe it would work. But right now, the person who ought to be doing that is the Attorney General of the United States, it seems to me. He ought to be the domestic security officer for the country. He's a member of the cabinet. He's a statutory member of the National Security Council. You know, I would think if his talents and the talents of that department were utilized properly, that he ought to be able to do it. On the other hand, you know, I have not sat where Louis Freeh has sat, so I don't want to criticize it. I worry about creating more czars, if you will, in the White House for everything, because they tend to have their authority diffused unless they've got budget authority, and none of them do. So I'm kind of a little uneasy about that, but Director Free, I'm sure, can explain it fully this afternoon.